But I'm still very unhappy that Mitt did everything he could to derail Donald Trump. He attacked him on a personal level about his character, integrity, his honor.
I just think the challenge with Governor Romney is not just what he said about Trump. He was Trump's most vicious and most explicit opponent all through the campaign on the Republican side.
Joining me now, Morgan Ortegas, Mark Meckler, and Gina Loudon. Gina, let's start with what's not news yet, okay? Secretary of State is the big elephant in the room, is the big dark cloud that's creating something of a schism between those core Trump supporters, particularly in his inner circle, and the idea that he would go with Mitt Romney. What are you thinking?
I'm one of those Trump supporters that really hopes that he doesn't. I'm thinking, though, Charles, as I've watched Mr. Trump progress throughout this campaign, and many of us, including myself, have overestimated him at various times and not realized that he was playing chess, while perhaps in my brain I was playing checkers. I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, but picks like Romney and Haley are concerning for those of us who were sort of fighting against what they were throwing at us throughout his entire primary process in general. So let's hope he goes a different direction, at least with Romney.
Morgan, of course, others are saying that, hey, this is a perfect example of the statesmanship and sort of the maturity that Donald Trump is bringing to the White House. And some Republicans would be elated if Mitt Romney was the choice.
I agree with you, and he hasn't picked anyone yet. I think that Mr. Trump, who's the president-elect, deserves to have the time to go through all of his choices and figure out who's the best fit for him. I actually think that's disloyal for some of these people that have been around him, like Huckabee and Gingrich, to come out and criticizing him for even considering Romney. He has the ability to consider Republicans, Democrats, independents, whomever he wants, and make the best team. Trump is a businessman. I'm sure that he's been a part of hostile takeovers or been in business situations where you have to add someone to the board who maybe you had a hostile business relationship with. So he knows how to work with people across the aisle, and let's let him actually make the choice before we all go crazy, before he's even decided who should be Secretary of State.
Yeah, but Mark, I guess, we get back to the people who thrusted Donald Trump into the White House, and that's on the grassroots level. Certainly this was an election about anti-globalists, anti-elitists, anti-establishment, and many people would say the poster boy for all three would be a Mitt Romney.
Yeah, I don't think that's incorrect. I think there'll be a lot of people in the grassroots that are really frustrated if Romney is the choice. I actually think they're looking for somebody who would take a more muscular posture in favor of the United States on the world stage, who would be a little bit more brash and more bold. I'm actually surprised not to hear Bolton's name being bandied about anymore. So we'll see what happens. But he has to balance the grassroots against whatever he thinks he wants his cabinet.
Mark, are you saying Mitt Romney would not have America's best interests at heart?
I'm not saying that. I think he would take a different approach. Mitt Romney is much more of a measured guy. He would take a much less muscular stance on the world stage, at least publicly. And I think the American people are ready for a very bold, very brash America First policy.
Well, and I agree with your guest, Charles. I think Bolton would also be a fantastic pick. The thing about Ambassador Bolton is that he knows where all of the bodies are buried at the State Department. He knows how to affect real change. And this is the great opportunity, the plethora of choices that Donald Trump has. And so I agree that Bolton's another one to consider who could bring real reform and real change.
Well, no, Gina, when Bolton was apparently, it was between Bolton and Giuliani perhaps a week ago, at least in the scuttlebutt arena. Many were saying he was a neocon and that kind of stuff. You've been with Donald Trump from the very beginning. What would make you happy? Who do you think is the right kind of pick for the person that you went out there and put your blood, sweat, and tears into?
Well, I saw Rudy Giuliani out there fighting hard for President-elect Trump throughout the entire campaign. So I would think that his loyalty would certainly be a consideration. He's certainly demonstrated a level of leadership and a true passion and love for America. Ambassador Bolton is another option that I think could be very good. I think that this is the other thing we have to recognize, though, Charles, especially as the wife of somebody who has held office, that we're not going to agree, even those of us who are his most ardent, oldest supporters, we're not going to agree on every single decision he makes. About 2/3 of his decisions, if we tend to agree on those, then we have another Reagan on our hands, and that would be a good thing. So I'm sort of braced to disagree with him in some of these areas.
Okay, well, Mark, here's the thing. A lot of people disagree with the Nikki Haley choice at UN. Although for Donald Trump, again, I think it makes him look like a pretty good statesman. Also, it elevates one of his first supporters to the governor of South Carolina. What do you make of that? And even perhaps the education secretary, who the initial knee-jerk reaction, believe it or not, from Breitbart, which had 2 negative Trump headlines in a row. I mean, back-to-back days. Who would have thunk it before the inauguration? A lot of core conservatives aren't really happy, even though you can knock off a couple things, knocks from the mainstream media with respect to him not picking women.
Look, I think Nikki Haley is a little bit suspect for the UN, especially because she just doesn't have a lot of foreign policy experience, but it was a wise political play. It does elevate her lieutenant governor, who was an early and strong supporter of Trump, so that gives him somebody in that governor's seat who will ultimately be the incumbent and run and be reelected. That is a strong supporter of his. So I think that's very helpful for him. As far as Betsy DeVos for Secretary of Education, I personally can't imagine anybody better. She's somebody she's sort of cut straight from the grassroots cloth, even though she's a very wealthy woman. And she is definitely a supporter of the kind of education reform that Donald Trump has promised and the country needs.
Yeah, I think just for the audience who may not be understand this, where this is coming from, apparently she has donated money to Jeb Bush Foundation, which is a Common Core-based sort of educational foundation, even some things with Clinton. And then it's said that she pushed back against families in Michigan who were against Common Core. But she immediately came out with a tweet to explain that she is pro-free choice. She's going to push for that, and she is not for Common Core. So maybe that will sort of mitigate some of the anxiety. I want to ask you about Nikki Haley, though, Morgan. It's one of these things where you can see perhaps why she took it. You know, later on she might want to run for the White House. She'll be able to say I have international experience. But overall, do you like this choice?
It's an interesting choice. I like Nikki Haley a lot. I have to say that she is the luckiest woman in Republican politics, man or woman right now, because what every governor wants is what you just said. They want foreign policy experience. So really, first of all, I have to say, you can't do a worse job than Susan Rice at the UN. I mean, just despicable. That's an aside. But when it comes to Nikki Haley, she doesn't have the foreign policy experience, but she has a lot of international companies that are based in South Carolina. Her husband fought in Afghanistan. He did a tour for a year. So she knows what it's like for a family to have to send a loved one off to war. So I think clearly that she's going to have to be guided by the White House as it relates to foreign policy. It's an interesting pick. I think that she's a fantastic face for America to be represented here in New York, and we look forward to having her.
All right, and finally, real quick, Gina, Dr. Ben Carson, a lot of news out today, a lot of false alarms, perhaps edging toward accepting housing and urban development. Obviously, Donald Trump wanted him to be a part of the team, and probably in any capacity. What do you make of this potential pick?
I am a huge fan of Dr. Ben Carson being part of this administration. I think it's critical that he is. He's been there from day one for President-elect Trump. He deserves that loyalty, and I think he will do a great job. I myself would have hoped to have seen him in a little bit more medical capacity, just given his background. But I think if he ends up someplace else, Charles, that probably President-elect Trump and he have talked through things about his passions, his priorities, and the things he wants to accomplish going forward. And if that's where they decide he belongs, I'm all in.
Yeah, you know what? The inner city kid who was able to pull himself out of certain circumstances.
That's right.
If he could apply life experiences and what he knows and what he did, maybe that could be a great situation. Like you, I'm a huge fan.
Invaluable.
Thank you guys very much.
You have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt to the country that the people of the United States of America are ready to hold the first Article 5 convention in the history of this country. I congratulate you, I salute you, and may God bless you. Thank you very much.